if you're sedentary, it's hard to burn fat during exercise. And this is known as exercise resistance. And so 8,000 steps per day will help to ameliorate this so-called exercise resistance from being sedentary.
All right, so in the next part, Dr. Mike dives into one of the most important insights from the paper: how the number of steps you take each day actually changes how your body processes fat. He's about to show you real data comparing people walking as little as 3,000 steps a day versus those doing 8,000 or more. And the difference? It's not small. He also talks about something called postprandial plasma triglycerides. This is the amount of fat circulating in your blood after you eat a meal. And what the research shows is powerful. The more active you are, the better your body gets at clearing out that fat and actually using it for energy, rather than storing it. Let's check it out.
So let's talk about ways to overcome exercise resistance and talk about why you should be walking at least 8,000 steps per day. So let's get back to table 1 from the paper that we've been talking about here. What you see is low step counts versus high step counts and the changes in fat oxidation after exercise. So the resting fat oxidation increases 19% after the same exercise bout only in people who are having a high step count. And in this particular analysis, it was 16,000 steps per day, which is on the higher end that most people will be able to achieve. But if you compare and contrast that to the low step count group, which was just 4,800 steps per day, which I think most people should at least aim for 6,000 steps on the low end. The resting fat oxidation differences here were, 13%. And so this is a pretty statistically significant difference. And you can see here, there's a little asterisk indicating that this was a p-value of 0.005, meaning that if you were to reproduce this 1,000 times, 995 times, you would get this same result. So it's very statistically significant, which is important. You also see a reduction in plasma triglycerides following the lipid load test or high fat tolerance test. You see a reduction in triglycerides of 27% in the high step count group compared to the low step count group. You also see changes and reductions in heart rate. You see changes in perceived exertion. The high step count group has a lower perceived exertion. And I think this is really important. People that are very sedentary, they go to the gym and they're just exhausted. Like, oh my gosh, I can barely do this. But when you're more recreationally active and just move throughout the day, improving the so-called NEAT, non-exercise associated thermogenesis, just moving throughout the day, just walking, being active, you start to see all these different changes, including reductions in blood lactate. And so a lot of people notice one of the inhibitors of exercise is the buildup of lactic acid. It creates that burning sensation in your lungs and in your muscles when you're doing high intensity explosive work. There was a 11% reduction in lactate buildup in the high step count group versus the low step count group. And essentially what this is hinting at is the more background steps you have per day, the more responsive your body is to exercise, to structured exercise specifically. So you're going to get a better return on your exercise investment if you have more steps per day. But let's look here at figure 4. And this is the relationship between levels of physical activity and fat oxidation, as well as post-meal plasma triglyceride levels. And what you can see here is essentially, this is another way of depicting graphically what we just talked about. The increase in fat oxidation in individuals who have a normal step count of 8,400 steps per day versus a low step count after exercise. And you see here the fat oxidation, which is kilocalories over the course of 16 hours. For those of you listening, you might just note these figures, and I think the graph really tells the whole story in the video. You have 325 in the low step count group versus close to 400 in the high step count group. So a pretty significant difference here, about 25%. And similarly, if you look at the post-meal triglyceride levels, you see a massive difference after a lipid load test, comparing the high step count versus the low step count. So I think it's really important to acknowledge, and this is really where we're going to drive this point home, looking at all-cause mortality. So it's one thing to talk about fat loss and the theoretic benefits of improving your metabolic health. It's another thing to think about not dying prematurely. And this is where this study by Bannock et al. In 2023, and we've shared this and talked about this numerous times, but this was repurposed in this particular analysis. And I think it's important for you all to see this. The sweet spot in terms of the number of daily steps we all should be striving to achieve per day and its associations with reduced chances of all-cause mortality or dying from all causes happens to be around 8,600 steps per day. Now, it does turn out more is actually better in this case, and this is for individuals over and under the age of 65. And so death from all causes, as well as cardiovascular specific mortality, can be reduced if we walk more than 8,600 steps.
What do we actually do with all of this information? Simple. You walk more, and you do it every single day. And this isn't just for fat loss, but because it makes your entire system run better. So after listening to Dr. Mike explain why walking is essential for fat loss and overall health, we understand that daily movement helps you lower the fat in your blood after meals. It helps your body burn more fat at rest, and it lowers the stress on your heart and your brain. So now if we combine that with smart resistance training, that's when you really start dropping body fat. Why? Because walking keeps your metabolism turned on. And strength training tells your body to hold onto the muscle whilst burning fat. So that's the formula. Walk daily, lift consistently, eat with intention. And of course, this is nothing new if you're one of my clients. You've already seen this laid out for you on my app in the body fat and behavior guides. It's very clear there that if you want to be a certain body fat percentage, so whether it's 25% or 10%, you have to display different behaviors. And the daily step count is one of the big aspects on there, which you'll see change from the higher body fat percentage to the lower body fat percentage. A little bit like how or what the research has just shown us. And then the other aspect, of course, is strength work and structure. And I'm so glad that we've gone through this research because it just confirms what we've been doing all along. And if walking isn't your go-to every day, that's not a problem either. So here's how you might want to go about it in a different way so that you still get the same fat burning benefits with other, should say, low intensity options. So you still have to do this on top of your gym session, but if you can't do, let's say, 60 to 75 minutes of walking at a steady pace, that should hit your 8,000 steps, then maybe go for a light cycle. And we can do this for, let's say, 45 to 60 minutes. Again, I'd rather you stick to the higher end. So you'd have to do 60 minutes of cycling, and then on top of that, do your session. And again, with this as well, we don't want anything too intense. We just want something that's light and quite moderate as well. On the other hand, if you go for something like swimming, I'd stick to about 30 to 45 minutes. I'd say maybe even push it to an hour if you can. So the movement type doesn't really matter. It's just the message. So it's about consistency, aiming for activity that's, should I say, sustainable, repeatable, low stress on the body, but as we've just heard throughout this whole talk, powerful for your metabolism. So you don't need to overhaul your life. You just need to commit to the basics and try to do it well. So walking, training, consistency. All right. Thank you, guys. I'm Giftmclaren, and I believe that movement is king. I'll see you on the next one.